neighborhoods. And the various types of housing that are present there: single family, multifamily, and also accessory dwelling units, which is the focus of this presentation. A recent survey from Zillow produced the statistic that nearly 80% of Tampa residents support at least one modest densification measure in the city. For instance, allowing mother-in-law flats or backyard cottages, ADUs, or duplexes, triplexes in residential neighborhoods. So what is an accessory dwelling unit? Well, it's currently not defined in the code, and that is something that we'd like to address. Florida statute defines an ADU as an ancillary or secondary living unit that has a separate kitchen, bathroom, sleeping area, existing either within the same structure or on the same lot as the primary dwelling unit. Where are ADUs currently allowed in the city? They're limited largely to two areas: the Seminole Heights area in almost all of the zoning districts in that area. On the left is the map showing the extent of the city that covers. And then the Lowry Park area, which is the map on the right. Within the Lowry Park area that's outlined there by Sly, North Boulevard, Waters, and Armenia, it's only allowed in RS50 and RS60 zoning. The special use criteria that does exist in the code for accessory dwelling units limits it to a maximum of 950 square feet. The main residence shall be owner-occupied. The ADU must be designed to be located within the single-family structure with a separate entrance or without a separate entrance, but it may not be located in a non-conforming accessory structure. This is something that we'll speak to later in the day as part of the publicly initiated text amendments. At no time may the number of occupants of an ADU exceed 2, and the permit must be reviewed annually by staff, and if conditions change, a new permit will be issued and a hearing will be required. Extended family residences are similar to ADUs, but there are some distinct differences. Largely, it's the size, limited to 600 square feet relative to the 950. It can only be approved when the main residence is owner-occupied. It's designed to be located within a dwelling or as a separate structure. The occupants of an extended family residence need to be limited to family members by marriage, blood, adoption, or legal guardianship. The intent of the use is to be temporary, to serve a temporary need, and the occupancy cannot exceed 2. Going to the next slide is just the comparison of what those two uses are and what they allow. Extended family residences are allowed in all zoning districts in the city. There is not a geographic limitation like with ADUs. And you can see the comparison there that parking is required for ADUs, but it's not required for extended family. ADUs may be separately rented, but extended family residences may not. And then ADUs are allowed to be separately metered, whereas extended family residences are not allowed to be separately metered. Looking at the production trend, how many have been coming online within the last several years, we're averaging about 8 accessory dwelling units per year just in those allowable areas, and about 13 extended family residences per year, noting the ADUs are limited to just that 4%, those two areas of the city. So to dig deeper into that Zillow survey, we conducted our own survey for about a month. We got 1,000 responses. This was put out on Nextdoor and Facebook just to gauge public interest and feedback on the concept. 85% of homeowners were interested in building an ADU or learning about how to build an ADU on their property, but it was for a variety of reasons, not just for housing for a parent or relative, which was important, but also to generate landlord income and just to generally be able to reinvest in helping the neighborhood grow and redevelop. About a third of the responses were from 1 to 2 person households. About a quarter of responses were from South Tampa, and a quarter of responses were from Seminole Heights. South Tampa, it's not currently allowed, as I said, and so a lot of those responses were related to growth and density and redevelopment, given the unique geography of South Tampa. The Seminole Heights feedback was more related to issues with the current criteria and the existing code and not being able to actually build the ADU even though it's allowed in their zoning district. So very different responses from both of those areas. Limited responses from New Tampa. And so we're taking all this information and we're going to develop some frequently asked questions that was asked for to help guide people and answer some of the questions that were recurring that are easy to answer. And the results of the survey, every individual response has been posted on the city's website for review. Just categorizing some of those comments, the most common topics were housing for a family member, being able to provide more affordable housing in the city through using ADUs, permitting issues and difficulties with getting through that process, as well as land use and zoning constraints in that area. In addition to the survey, we conducted some interviews with peer cities, St. Pete, Orlando, as well as Long Beach, California. Just some of the lessons learned that were really important to us. Parking requirements were generally waived or relaxed in most situations. About 20% of the units were occupied rent-free. Perhaps it's for a student at one time and they're not charging rent, or it's for an actual separate family and somebody that's being charged rent at a reasonable rate. But whatever the case may be, that flexibility was valued, and that's where the 20% comes from. It was allowed in non-conforming structures in all of these jurisdictions, and allowing the use provides a path to amnesty. That was something that every jurisdiction said was, as they opened it across more residential districts, it created a path to come in and look at existing structures and bring them up to code and work through that process and get them on the tax rolls. As far as South Tampa goes, this was generally the feedback from South Tampa. Almost 80% of South Tampa is in the coastal high hazard area. We are going through a coastal action plan process now to determine what the future specifically of south of Gandy is going to be, given these issues and given the unique geography and evacuation constraints. We're not proposing to look more closely at South Tampa just yet. So what we'd like to do today with your feedback is recommend you consider amending Chapter 27 to do a couple of things. The first is to just create the definition for an ADU because it's not there. The second would be to look at the three areas in the comp plan that are designated for more growth, that are prepared for more growth. That would be the Central Tampa Planning District, the West Shore Planning District, and the University Planning District. Again, leaving out the New Tampa Planning District, leaving out the South Tampa Planning District for the reasons I mentioned on the prior slide. And also establishing some criteria to address some of the issues with not being able to do it even though it's allowed in my zoning district, that situation. So we would propose to allow in all residential zoning districts the ADU use. The maximum size would not change at 950. We would allow in non-conforming structures and continue to require the homestead for the property. And one parking space would continue to be required except if the unit was 500 square feet or less, then parking would be waived. And so today we'd ask for your feedback, and we'd like to bring back some preliminary language in October and then take it out for public input.
Councilman Maniscalco.
Thank you very much for your presentation, all your hard work. I have a tremendous amount of respect for you because you really do understand what's going on in the city and the needs. Having said that, I saw in one of your first slides, it says Seminole Heights allows ADUs, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I don't want to rat anybody out, but I know somebody in Seminole Heights that has their home, and I know they're allowed to do this, but they have a structure in the back where they rent to two individual people. The rent that this person collects from those two rentals in the back pays for his mortgage. So not only does it allow him to get that American dream, the home ownership of being able to afford that mortgage, because he does not make a lot of money. He's on an hourly pay, whatever, but he allows two other individuals to afford living, with dignity in a unit. He's a very good landlord, takes care of everything. But he's a perfect example of when we expand allowing ADUs throughout the city, with our affordable housing crisis, with the demand and all the new people that are moving here, and folks that make only a certain amount of income. This is a quicker pathway, expanding this throughout other parts of the city where we can create affordability through the private sector while people earn income, are able to pay their mortgages, whatever it is, but we get folks off the street, we get more folks to worry less that they have another option other than $2,000 a month for this apartment or $1,800 for this student, whatever it is. I mean, this is really a no-brainer. I know that it says here to establish the criteria of requiring homestead, which I agree with. Some others may not agree with. Why does it have to be owner-occupied in order for them to rent? Why can't it just be rental, rental, rental? I know we want to create some kind of stability there. I see that you have one parking space on site, but if it's less than that square footage of 500, no parking required. What I said earlier, not everybody drives a car, so there may not be that necessity. So I'm glad that you brought this forward. Because the necessity is there. We can't wait on other folks to build affordable housing or whatever when people, as you have surveyed, 85% support of the people, the 1,000 responses that you received in 30 days, 85% support the ADUs for whatever they say, whether it's income for themselves or to create housing opportunities for other people. So before we make any motions, of course, we'll hear from the public, but thank you for bringing this forward. This is significant. I know that I made a motion a while ago to discuss triplexes and quads and whatnot. We have to look at all avenues. This is a great path moving forward, but we have to expand and look at everything that we can do to tackle this affordable housing issue. So thank you, sir.
And Councilwoman Hurtak.
And I agree with everything Councilman Maniscalco said. This is a great idea. This is something that I've been wanting to do long before I got on council. So I'm all about this. I do have some things that I would like you to explore more. The maximum size is 950 square feet. So is there a way that it wouldn't just have to be one unit, it could be 2 units within 950 square feet? Because not everybody wants 950 square feet. For me, I'd be interested to know if you could have 2 units and that would be legally allowable within that 950 square feet. I would like to see that. Right now, there are only 2 people that are allowed to live in that. 950 square feet is a lot. Really. No, I mean, it is.
It's bigger than my condo.
Yeah, and so what I would like to see is I would like to see that changed to no more than 2 unrelated people. So say a family wanted to move in, a couple who have a child or, something like that. So because if it's 950 square feet, the chances are that's a 2-bedroom and you could have more than 2 people living there. My question about this is, would this take out the extended family residences for the central district? And if not, why not? And I would like to see no required parking, like none. I don't see a need for that. It just takes up more land. It takes up more pervious space. I just don't agree with that. And the other thing I'd like you to look into, and I think this might be part of something later on today, is I'd like the city to look into creating, maybe working with developers or people who work on these issues, 5 or 6 plans that are just plug and play. If you want this, great. Here are some dimensions that the city has already approved. So if it doesn't, your outside could be different, but the inside could be the same. That way they could just choose that design and move through the process much faster.
Very good. Very good. Councilman Miranda.
Thank you. I just
Could he answer that
whispered
question for me
Mr.
real
Coons. I
quick?
said 900
Councilman
square
Miranda, I apologize.
feet. I'm sorry.
I
was the
just wanted
question?
you to answer the extended family residence question for me.
What was the
Why we
question?
can't
I'm
take
sorry.
that out. Why can't we take out extended family residences? Because this seems to deal with that issue.
We can bring that back. There are 2 different specified uses with different
Okay.
criteria, and we have many that are on the books already that we actively have to continue. So we can take a look at that and bring
But-
back something.
Just in a way enveloping it, because I have an ADU and it's just confusing.
Yeah, understood.
So less of that, and then I have something else, but I'll wait for after.
Understood.
Thank you, Councilman Miranda, for your patience.
Oh, I said, wow, I didn't say anything. You already thanked me. I just whispered to Mr. Coons, 900 and some feet, it's a lot of room. And I was just, in my mind, putting that to where I grew up at, and I said, that's about a third or maybe 40% larger than where we had 5 individuals living in, and everybody was happy. So anyway, thank you very much. But your program starts with page, let me see here, 13, and you've been now through page 25 and 27. Let's go back, if I may.
Yes, sir.
And just see how this works. On page 17, that was allowed for a long time in Seminole Heights and Laurie Park area. Ms. Moretta, that's the one that's family can come in and have an accessory use in the house in the back? Yes or no? Which is the one that we have that the family can come in and you had to have an ID and get checked and so forth and so on?
That's the extended family residence.
All right,
Yes,
that's a
sir.
family resident. Is that still available, right?
Yes,
And do we do yearly checks like supposed to?
yes.
And if I ask you for a 3-year check, you can verify that 100% have been checked?
I'll tell you.
Abby Bailey, I want to say Land Development Coordination, I'm going way back. They've they accept affidavit now. I don't know that during COVID, they were doing on-site inspections. Eric Cotton oversees that part, and can come back to you on that.
Believe me. But I'm gonna skip between page 19 and page 20. When I look at page 19, there's some things here that tell me really. Number F, the occupants of the extended family residence may not pay rent to the user of the residence or property. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, there are laws that we still have in place that if you have one house, it's a residence, and you are owner occupied, you pay just the normal tax. If you have another dwelling, what happens then to the tax?
We did
Is that
look
a-
into,
Is that a rental unit or not?
we did look into that with the property appraiser, so it would be triggered when the unit is constructed. They would come out during inspections and determine what the unit is going to be used for. If the intent at that time is to use it for an extended family, it would be it's part of the principal, it's an accessory use to the principal structure. If the intent is not, then it would trigger a different determination by property appraiser.
And I'm not a liberal and I'm not a conservative, I'm a realist, in my mind anyway. So then, what happens today stays there forever without being checked, more than likely. I'm talking to the general public. Maybe never gets inspected again. So then what I'm saying, how do we know that they're not paying rent? A, how do we know that they're family attached if we don't have either the ancestry just by an affidavit you sign? That way you used to do business when I was a young man. Things have changed so much in this country that a lot of people don't give a damn what happens. And I gotta verify in my mind, because the way I was raised, that all these things are factual. And I'm having a conflict within myself. How do I vote yes when I can't verify if it's true or not? The special use permit shall be reviewed annually by staff if any conditions or occupants change, and a new special use permit will be required. And I put down, really? When I don't believe we've been doing it for years. That's number one.Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not saying that I'm right. I'm just throwing out questions so we can understand where the playing field is. And the owner of a single-family dwelling must certify that his or understanding the extended family residence is limited to the condition presented in S1 application, including number of residents, who the occupants will be, and the relationship of the occupants to the main residence, or location and size of the extended family residence. The certification shall be attached to the approved letter of the exhibit. That might be factual on day one, but is it factual throughout? We're getting so watered down that if I was the IRS, I'd audit all of them. Don't we get audited? Then why don't we audit these things? I'm not against these things, but I want to make sure that somebody is not, and I'm going to say in plain English, that some homeowner is not cheating by not paying their due tax. If they're collecting rent, they got to pay the IRS, and they got to pay what? They don't pay no more single-family residents. Their rent, their taxes go up by 3 or 4% on your ad valorem taxes. That's all I want. I want to make sure that the other public that lives in this city is not paying the tax for somebody who should have been paying their own tax, if you follow that. Yes. So that's all that I want. I want to make sure that we're verified, and I understand all these things, but I have yet to hear how are you going to complement the rest of the population by saying the facts that you have verified and that that's not happening.
So part of the way that we're doing that is we're not actually changing the extended family residence language. This is not changing.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
We're not actually changing this language for the extended family residences. That's going to stay the way it is. What we're focused on is the ADUs and expanding where those are allowed in the zoning through more areas. So if there are extended family residences in the areas that we've added, those will be able to come into the sunshine, come into light, and be addressed and brought up to code and be brought on the tax rolls. That would be the intent within those 3 areas, because if it's an extended family and it comes in under that, you're correct, there might be issues.
And the reason I say that, and I'm not trying to belabor old news, but there's hundreds and maybe thousands of units right now in certain sections of the city that are divided the house into 3 and 4 pieces. It's still family residence. You can't go in and check because the law doesn't let you. They put different things in so you can't see. And some taxpayers, all of us, are subsidizing that taxpayer to a certain amount because they're not paying the proper tax. So therefore, you get zero, just $1,000, let's say, for average house. That house should be paying about $3,000 in taxes, and they're not being collected. The school board, the county commission, and the cities are not getting the property tax. Therefore, that we're not collecting is being paid by the rest of us. That's all that I'm saying. I want to make sure that when we help someone, someone's not taking advantage. And I'm not talking about the people we're helping, about the people who own the place that are doing these things. And there's hundreds of them, if not thousands, and I can show you anytime you want.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I'm sorry, Councilwoman Hurtak.
I also wanted to talk a little bit about the rules for kitchens. If you could go to whatever that slide was. Again, 950 square feet, sure, kitchen. But there's plenty of people who live in larger cities and other areas, even ADUs that aren't compliant, that are just living with like a hot plate or microwave, or, you know, there are so many cooking tools today that don't require an oven. And so I'd really love to see how we can look at that, because that's a choice. You don't have to cook. And so if we're able to, you know, have smaller places that don't require a large kitchen, I would also really support that.
Ms. Travis, you would like to say something?
Yes. So a lot of the conversation that we're having between extended family use, accessory dwelling units, we're going to go back to this and look at it, because I do agree that it is complicated and hard to understand. The other thing is putting things in the code that you're not going to enforce and having to check, and do we have the resources to check? So we're really going to evaluate that on how we can simplify that, make it easier for the public, easier for staff to enforce, easier for you as a legislative body to be able to talk to constituents on what's allowed and what's not allowed. So we're absolutely going to do that. The other thing, there is a minimum livable space in the Florida building code that dictates how small we can go. And with the last building code update, that they have a provision about tiny homes. So we could go as small as 400 square feet. So your comments as far as how can we allow more than one unit is something we can look at. And the Florida building code does dictate how small we can go. So we'll look at that all as a part of this. Okay? Okay, thank you.
Is there, go ahead, Mr.
And
Pence.
we're asking to come back in October with some more information. So.
Okay. Can we do this all at one time like we're going to do with everything else? Or would you like a separate motion on this now? Thank you very much. Is there anybody in the in the chambers for public comment to this part of the agenda item?
Yes, I do. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name's John Campbell, and my wife Shirley McGinnis and I live at 4802 North Highland Ave in South Seminole Heights. Shirley bought our house in 2005, and she and our now adopted son Vince lived with us after Shirley, even well after Shirley and I got married in 2011. Our house is a two-story stilt house built in 1923 with no internal access between floors. A major reason Shirley bought our house 17 years ago was to someday turn the downstairs, around 900 square feet, into a rentable apartment once Vince moved out and she retired. Well, Shirley's now retired, and Vince has finally moved out at 35 years old. Over the past 4 years, we've explored various ways to make the downstairs space legal, but to no avail. Mind you, we're not talking about an auxiliary structure, just the downstairs. We attempted to get an SU-1 auxiliary dwelling permit, but we were denied because instead of having a 20-foot setback required in this zoning district, we only had 17. Due to the complicated series of transactions and vacation inherent in older homes in Seminole Heights. Again, this house will turn 100 years old next year. We then pursued and are still pursuing a rezoning from an SH-RS to a PD to allow for a dwelling two-family. This attempt has been met with a myriad of difficulties which have seen several city departments at odds with the proposal, exacerbated by particular nature of access to the property via city-owned parcels. Over the years, I've been told many times, just do it. Nobody follows the rules. Nobody's going to find out. Well, I retired from the Army as a lieutenant colonel after 27 years. I still work as an Air Force civilian at MacDill. I am by nature a rules guy, but I've been trying to untie this bureaucratic Gordian knot with no luck. As I approach retirement, I'd like to not only have some additional income, but also offer reasonably priced habitable housing to the citizens of Tampa. With the growth of Tampa comes a need for affordable and safe housing, particularly in centrally located part of town, with easy access to all the employment centers and amenities that make Tampa so special. Both the administration and the City Council note the need for additional housing inventory. We're trying to help address this problem, but we need your help. Shirley and I don't plan on moving. We love Seminole Heights. But there are administrative remedies which can make it even better. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Miranda.
I just want to tell Colonel Campbell, thank you for coming up. You said exactly what I just said in another way. Very professional. And what it is that the system works in different ways. And you should, by all means, that house is yours. You can rent, in my opinion, even though I don't have that, I don't rent any house. I have properties that I manage for a trust, but I don't live in those houses. So you're falling right into this operation that we're talking. I appreciate you coming in and stating the facts as they are, sir. Thank you very much.
Sir. Councilwoman Hurtak.
And I thank you as well, because this issue, to me, lends itself to another question. I mean, how do we take houses like yours, or say townhomes that often have on the bottom of those 4-story townhomes, they have like a single bedroom and a bath? Like, how could we, you know, if someone encloses their garage, how can they use that for an ADU? Like, how do we look at other ways to do, to provide affordable housing?
Sir, to
Mr.
address
Betts,
the comment from Mr. Campbell, we'll be looking into that issue later in the day in one of our presentations to address that issue with the non-conforming structure.
My name is Nathan Hagan. Why are ADUs not already legal citywide? In 1942, the city of Tampa passed its first zoning ordinance, which established a set of rules for how we build housing in the city of Tampa. According to last year's excellent equity report by the Planning Commission, one of our first zoning code's fundamental aims was to turn racial segregation into economic segregation to evade accountability for the growing civil rights union at the time. And that's from a great report done by the Planning Commission last year. The strategy was to make it so that people at the bottom of the economic ladder were limited in where they could live by making houses artificially scarce in places where wealthier folks live, by banning garage apartments, duplexes, triplexes, and more. If you could not afford a single-family home, you were likely in crisis. This was the point. This was on purpose. We have never reckoned with this as a city. Our housing crisis today is a direct result of that framework. The same problem persists. If you cannot afford to live in a single-family home in the city of Tampa, you are probably in crisis. What has changed lately is that it's no longer just affecting our communities of color, but everybody who needs a place to live. We have very low wages. Most residents in Tampa today are renters. Too many people can't afford to rent, much less own a single-family home. With the increase recently of more wealthy people moving here, the few areas we relegated for poor and working people has diminished. I'm here to ask City Council to take aggressive steps towards undoing this. We need more options, and I support staff's recommendations here, which I think we should start with today, especially the ADU piece here. Homeowners who want to earn rental income want it. Older folks who want to retire or who can't afford to move or maintain their homes want it so they can downsize and age in place or provide housing for caretakers. Employers and employees alike want this great workforce housing near job centers. Over half of people between 20 and 30 live with their parents, which is an incredible statistic that I keep running into. This is great for them too.
Mr. Hagan, if I may interrupt you, and I'll put your time back on. Ma'am, you're videotaping us. We don't mind that, but that light is blinding us.
I'll just wrap up with my last bit here. So I think we should get the ball rolling with today's suggestions. Make your motions, say yes. I would please ask all of you to demonstrate your commitment to the elderly, retired, and workforce by supporting a comprehensive ordinance, which our organization, YIMBY Tampa, is working on right now and have been discussing with some of you already. So we need to come up with a comprehensive solution on ADUs. I think these are good suggestions, but I think we can do better, and we're working on building community support for a comprehensive ordinance that I hope I can talk to all of you about if I haven't already spoken to you. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hagan.
Good morning again. I think I have more questions than anything. So I agree with the accessory dwelling units. Exactly what is meant by Central Tampa? Can the ADUs, are they only single story or can they be multi-story? And if someone can't afford it, if they have the land and someone can't afford to build it, is there help for them in receiving assistance in building the units?
Could you, Ms. Lockett, can you tell us who you are?
Oh, I'm sorry, Robin Lockett.
Thank you, Ms. Lockett.
We don't know who you are. Good morning. Come here. I want to make sure. So the question about is if someone can't afford to build an accessory dwelling unit, one of the things that we're hoping to look at as a pilot project for the East Tampa CRA is, I'm telling you, this is conceptual, trying to look into it, that if we have a homestead, a person that lives on the property, their land is large enough and they wanted to do an accessory dwelling unit, we're looking to see if we can put together a program to help them build an accessory dwelling unit. That way, it could be income for them. They can live in the accessory dwelling unit and rent their home if they want to. So we're looking at it because citywide, we don't have the funding to allow for everything. In the CRAs, you have the resources to kind of pilot certain projects. And so we're researching that to be able to answer the question that Ms. Lockett is asking about. That's the only question you had?
I had three.
What was the two-story? Yes, you can do more than one story. And what was the third? Oh, the central planning district. So the central planning district is generally everything except for New Tampa and South Tampa. So it will include Tampa Heights, West Tampa, East Tampa, mostly the central city. So not South Tampa and not New Tampa.
Okay.
So we'll start with that large geographical area.
Thank you.
Any more questions, Ms. Lockett?
I'll call you.
You call me. I know. Thank you.
Chairman, one more thing and then I'm finished.
Okay, Councilman Miranda.
If I may, under page 19, under F, where it says the extended family residents may not pay rent, if that's what you really mean, the word may should be struck and put shall. That's legally more defensible.
Abby Feely. So those are the current criteria that are in the code today. I think when we were trying to frame this discussion for you this morning, we were trying to show you that right now there's two pots of how these things happen. One is through an extended family residence, which is a special use, and here are the conditions. And the other is through an ADU, and here are the conditions. So right now they're S1s, so they go in under an S1 application. When they're made a specified use, if they are meeting those criteria, they're gonna go straight to permitting. We're not gonna do the S1 administrative review anymore. So dependent on, I've heard a couple things here this morning. One was no more EFRs then. We'll just categorize anything as an ADU. We do need to be careful in that aspect because there are some where it's my mother living back there and I'm not gonna charge her rent. So if the ADU speaks to it having to be rented, we just need to be careful in the language when we come back to you. But I don't see it problematic. But what I heard was if we're gonna travel down the ADU, that umbrella could encompass both of those situations, and that monitoring and all that would go away. This would just become another unit. It would become a unit in this sense. It would be regulated by these conditions. If those conditions were observed to be in violation, then it would go through a code enforcement matter for the violation. But we would combine that, make it all fall under the ADU, make it a specified use, you meet these conditions, you're good to go.
Thank you.
Is there anyone online that would like to speak to this part of the agenda item?
I have the same 3 registered speakers online. Camilo Soto, if you can hear me, please unmute yourself. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Mr. Soto?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Good morning, council members. I actually wanted to speak more specifically on the Tampa Heights piece, but since I am getting called on this one, I just want to voice my support for the potential of getting rid of the extended family rule. I think the enforcement of that, you've already heard from staff as it being, unreasonably onerous and possibly costly. And I think it could be sunset and then address, I think, on a more personal basis with an individual that has the good fortune to be able to build an ADU. I mean, these things are expensive. They're little houses. They have their own same connections as a regular single family home or multifamily units would have, their own electrical, their own water. And so, at the end of the day, it should be up to the individual renting that unit out, especially if it's an individual that's living in a homesteaded property and it's truly an accessory to that primary residence, either rent it out or let a family member stay in there. But at the end of the day, that whole extended family rule, it's just draconian, and I think it could be addressed just under an ADU rule. And then I'll just hang tight for the Tampa Heights overlay district, which I'm in support of as well.
Thank you. Ms. Strohmeyer, are you there? Ms. Strohmeyer?
Hello, hi, how are you? I'm Jean Strohmeyer. I lived for 30 years in or based south of Gandy, and I'm listening to the accessory dwelling units. Okay, there's a lot to unpack that I've heard. To Councilman Miranda, yeah, people are going to do them whether they put them on the tax rolls or not. I have a very, very close family member who rented, in West Tampa and Town and Country, it is, you've got the garage, you've got that rented out. Any bedroom on the outside, they'll chop up the exterior wall to build one of them units. So you've got, 5 people renting around the entire house, and we all know it. They're not, as a matter of fact, this person I'm talking about, they literally took out the load-bearing wall in the room he was renting, and while he's living there, it left it so the rain just rained in and ruined all of his clothes, everything. But there was, of course, no recourse, but he just grained it and bared and left Tampa for good. So that was just the last straw. So yes, and I think I would support definitely caretakers' quarters. I mean, I have elderly parents, and they don't necessarily want somebody living in with them, but there's just no way, to have somebody that close, and then somebody coming back and forth that would help the caretaker, and it would also help. It'll help the elderly. Property rights is another thing. The thing is, when I had my rental here in Tampa, which I thank God got rid of, I just kept getting letters. Who's in there? What are they doing in there? It's like kind of none of y'all's business. That's the way I see it. Sorry, but it's just not. If somebody's going to do something illegal, which I wasn't, but if somebody's going to do something illegal, they're going to just do it illegally. So the cheaters, the IRS cheaters, whatever, they're just going to do what they're going to do. So you've got somebody like Ms. Hertog said, she's got one, she wants to get it online, and these other folks want to do it legally, but that's not the same. And again, if you're going to do it legally, they would have done it. So they're not going to. Path to amnesty, I don't know why that came in, and I need that one removed. I mean, I don't know why we're even talking about that at city council level. Homesteading, I think there may be a tax exemption, some kind of tax exemption for you to rent to somebody in an accessory dwelling. That's kind of a good idea if we can look into that. And again, here's another unintended consequences situation. So this needs to be talked about in depth with more of the citizens and just the people. We just really need to talk about it in a group setting so that way everybody's ideas can flow. And, that's just how we make it good and not just, to help certain people. So anyway, well, y'all have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Strohmeyer. Ms. Pointer, are you there?
Yes, sir. Good morning. Thank you so much for opening up to the workshops in this type of format. I'd like to point out that last week when I was in Washington, D.C., I went to an innovative housing exhibit on the National Mall. We actually have in Plant City a ADU builder who that's what they turn out. They turn out prefab ADUs. That's something that I think we should certainly look into incorporating into the situation. Oh, you guys are doing weird stuff on my computers. But I agree with the ADUs. And I think that you're gonna have people who break the rules no matter what, Councilman Miranda. But I think that it's time for us to stop acting like only one person can live there. If you have a house with a 3/4 acre lot and you want to put 2 or 3 tiny houses on the back of it, and tiny houses, is my understanding, have a different definition, you should be able to do so. If you're able to put more housing on your lot, then you should be able to do so in the city of Tampa. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here?
That was it.
Okay. What is the pleasure of council?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
So I'll make a motion that we come back and look at this in October, but that we approve. Yeah, that we're absolutely supportive of it, looking forward to gathering more information from others and bring it back to us in October to.
We'll decide when we lump
yeah.
everything together.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
Second.
We have a motion made by Councilwoman Hurtak, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. Any further discussion?
I'll support it now, but I've got to see the final result before I vote behind it. Thank you.
Councilman Goods.
I'm going to support it today. I got a concern when we talked about tiny houses. I think that's a different concept in neighborhoods. So I wouldn't want to see a bunch of tiny houses next to houses all inside of a neighborhood. So that's a concern for me about tiny houses. That should be a separate development somewhere versus all inside of neighborhoods. I think that destroys a neighborhood. That's just my opinion, but I'll support it today.
Councilman Carlson.
No, I would just say the same things my colleague just said. I'll support it today, pending what we see in the future.
Madam Clerk.
So I just have a few questions regarding the 3 motions that were made under this item. So the first one, when we had Ms. Feely and Mr. Benson presenting, were they presenting on privately initiated text amendments, or were those the public ones? And the second question would be in regards to the motion made by Councilmember Maniscalco, seconded by Councilwoman Hurtak, to bring back a preliminary draft ordinance. I'm hearing October. Is there a date certain?
We haven't set a date. We were going to make motions on all these separately, and then at the end, bring back a date certain for them to be reported back to us. Are we good?
Just clarity on the privately versus the public.
These are all public. These are all public at this point in time.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to the private yet.
Okay, and would those be transmitted to the Hillsborough County
No,
Planning
no,
Commission?
they're just coming. I think what Ms. Feely and Mr. Benson are looking for today are motions of general support of what's being generally proposed by staff as conceptual ideas. We don't have an actual ordinance at this point in time to transmit to the Planning Commission. So I think the idea is that they're looking for some indication that council is supportive of the concepts that are being presented by staff, so that staff can then move forward to actually codify, set it out in proposed ordinance form and bring it back to council for a date that we need to set in October, and we do need to set a definitive date and time for these matters to come back. So.
Madam Clerk? Is that good? Okay. Ms. Feely?
Okay, so we have.
I'm sorry, we had a motion made. Roll call vote.
Hurtak?
Yes.
Carlson?
Yes.
Goods?
Yes.
Vieira?
Yes.
Maniscalco?
Yes.
Miranda?
Yes.
And Citro?
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you.
So these are just motions of support, and then at the end of all of this, we will come forward with a motion setting forth an exact date and time that staff will bring back ordinances that codify these proposed concepts.
Councilman Carlson.
I have to step out for 15 minutes to go pick up my son. I'll be listening on my phone, and then we'll vote when I get back.
Okay, so item number 6 encompassed a lot. We have a small set of city-initiated code amendments that we're bringing forward to you today. Again, the first is to allow for single-family attached and multifamily residential to be permitted in the commercial intensive and commercial general zoning districts. Right now, this is a special use 1. It has 2 criteria. Those criteria are that it accesses an arterial collector and that it follows the RM24 standards. What we're asking for is that we make it a permitted use, no longer a conditional use, and that we remove the requirement to access the arterial or the collector, and we go ahead and still hold those uses to the RM24 standard. This would, again, reduce a process that's currently there. We've seen these. We've been looking at how many have come before you, how many have come before you on appeal, what's been going on. This opens up any property that's zoned commercial general or commercial intensive, which are typically located on our more intensive corridors, to allow for housing, which right now it allows for it as a conditional use, but it allows more intensive uses as permitted uses. So this is kind of a level setting in the code. We've talked about it a couple different times, and we're ready to move forward with this. We believe that this, again, would support the city's efforts in opening up additional inventory for potential residential uses and streamline a process.
Any comments or questions for Ms. Feely or staff? Councilwoman Hurtak.
I see in the big picture how this is a good idea, but once you take out commercial space, or, well, no, never mind. Thinking about something different, but yes.
Is there anyone in the chambers that wishes to make public comment to this part of the agenda item? Is there anyone online?
We have Camilo Soto.
Mr. Soto?
I think because a lot of items are bundled all together under 6, there are several people that are online that are waiting to comment on other items. So I think maybe we need to ask these folks who are online whether they are here to speak on that specific item. Just to kind of clarify, I think for the public and council, what's coming before you today are a number of items that were presented originally, I think, on February 24th. There were workshop items. There were publicly initiated text amendments and privately initiated text amendments, all that were talked about on February 24th. Unfortunately, the agenda doesn't spell out in specific subset each of those items, but that's what's being discussed at this point in time. So,
on my list, I have people that are gone by agenda items, so that's the reason why I'm
right. And so I think
this.
we need to, when we go to the ones that are online, I think we need to ask, do they have a comment as to the specific item? If they don't, then just move on. So.
Again, that's why I'm saying to this specific item. Ms. Strohmeyer, Ms. Pointer, or Mr. Soto, does anybody have any comments to this part of the agenda item?
I kind of got lost, sorry. Sorry. I'm good.
Thank you.
I'm good, thanks.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
I guess my only concern about this is that commercial general and commercial intensive are generally on larger streets. And just to the point that we had a comment earlier this morning, putting single family attached on a major street without any mixed use is a concern. While I think, I understand your reasoning for this, what are we doing to encourage that mixed use developments on our larger core, our larger streets?
So right now, the code, and I mean, we can talk about this, it's happening on Nebraska Avenue, it's happening on Boulevard, it's happening, but those are permitted uses right now as S1s. If you access an arterial collector and you meet RM24, you're allowed. I don't know that philosophically we're gonna shift to requiring mixed use. That's a different discussion. What this does is says that if I'm on Hillsborough Avenue right now, in lieu of having to go through that S1 process, I would be a permitted use. Our mixed use category within the city is called storefront residential. That is a permitted use right now in the commercial general and commercial intensive. That is either a stack with non-resi on the bottom and resi above, or it is a non-resi in the front and resi behind. So that is a permitted use in those districts right now. So if somebody wanted to do mixed use, but incentivizing mixed use and requiring it along these corridors would be a different discussion that I don't know would fall into this. We can have that discussion. If you wish to pursue that further, or we could talk about it as part of the comp plan update. We've got a lot of moving parts going on right now, but again, this would open up an inventory of land that currently requires a separate process. It would allow for things to move a little faster, and it would really, I think, reflect those corridors. I mean, people say to me all the time, there should be resi along Kennedy. I mean, one of the challenges we face is that logistically, a lot of those lots on those corridors, on Florida, on Nebraska, on Kennedy, they're not deep. They're not deep enough. They're 100 feet deep, or they're 120. And in order to get a true mixed use, you don't have the depth of the land in order to make that happen. So much of what you see come before you is an aggregation of that land. They'll take that front piece plus maybe 1 or 2 lots to get some additional depth, to have enough to queue up on the garage or to have structured parking and other things. So this would just, it's been something we've been challenged with, and over a few months and different appeals we see coming to you. So we thought in opening up those other housing opportunities and continuing to open up inventory for what we have, this would allow for that.
Yes, but you just said the elephant in the room, which is parking. To me, with these types of structures, if you have those narrow lots, a lot of the reason people don't bring mixed use is because they can't meet the parking requirements. So I would like to see that discussed later. I really want to bring up parking, but just to say, yes, if we do this, that's fine, but we don't need suburban parking or even regular residential parking for things like this along those major corridors.
And if you recall, you just actually adopted storefront resi parking for the city about 2 months ago, I think, because right now it is only in the NMU and in the Seminole Heights. So we did do that, and there is a reduced parking ratio for mixed use. It's 1 per unit, and then you park the non-resi at the regular rate. But if we need to revisit that, we could do that as well.
I'm just talking about the multifamily residential that would be on these, and even single family attached. Oftentimes you're seeing double garages with the, double parking in a driveway.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we don't need both of those things is kind of my point.
Okay.
Same thing with multifamily residential. Let's reduce that parking requirement so that they can build more on those areas, so.
Council?
Yes.
What's the pleasure of council?
Thank you. What is the pleasure of council?
Make a motion to approve and bring this back in October?
Or to bring it back at a time certain?
At a time certain, which I'm assuming is gonna be October 20th, but we'll get to it at the end.
I'll second.
A motion made by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilwoman Hurtak. Roll call vote.
Carlson? Goods?
Yes.
Vieira?
Yes.
Maniscalco?
Yes.
Miranda?
Yes.
Hurtek?
Yes.
Citro?
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously, with Carlson being absent at vote.
Thank you.
Okay, the next one up, which I'm excited, I wish our gentleman would have stayed. Another text amendment we're proposing is to remove the requirement or remove the restriction for ADUs or EFRs to be in non-conforming structures. And you've had several of these come to you on appeal because the way the code is currently written, you'll see that highlighted in blue there, we cannot approve an ADU or an EFR in a non-conforming structure. And I have a couple pictures of ones that came to you, either related to the size or related to the setback. So they come to you on appeal, you ultimately approve them. So we would remove that. And if it's gonna come back now per Stephen's discussion as a new ADU specified use, we would have a criteria that says that they may be located in non-conforming structures. And we would no longer prohibit that, which would open up to many structures in the Seminole Heights or other areas that have older detached structures that may not meet the setbacks, but we could use. The other side to that is, it's always our goal, you know, with nonconformities, that at somewhere down the road, those nonconformities go away, they're built back to code. So when they're coming to you on appeal and you're approving them, you're actually vesting them to the nonconformity. So I think this would be a really good cleanup that would allow for us to open up other structural options for those ADUs and EFRs, or now if they're only going to be ADUs, that would be great.
Councilman Miranda.
Just for the record, and I apologize to the public, whoever's following this, these numbers on the pages are not numbered like the other ones were. So I apologize to all of you who are following it. Just for the public sense, can you reiterate what you said on item C and C where the non-conforming structures are? It starts with an extended family residence and the other one is an accessory dwelling unit.
Right, so right now, if you have a detached accessory structure in the back of your home, and that is located at, let's say, a 1/2 foot and a 1/2 foot. Our code requires that that structure is at 3 foot and 3 foot. So the way this code reads right now, if you came and wanted to use that structure as either an accessory dwelling or an extended family residence, we would have to say no, because per this regulation, it says it has to be in a conforming structure. So we're finding that when we're doing that, we're saying no, they can appeal to council, they come into council, and you guys are approving it. So in order to do that and stop this whole cycle of it coming in administrative, and us denying it, then them appealing to you, it's just better business for us to say, okay, if we're all in favor of allowing these to go into non-conforming structures, let's make the code say that instead of continuing this cycle.
So well said, Mr. Chairman. If I make an example, so then the example that you have in the back of this is what you just said about the address. I'm not going to mention the address because I don't want to get.
That's okay. You've already approved those. They're
I know
closed
that,
cases.
but I don't want to
Okay.
say it. Somebody may say, "Well, look,
Okay.
for that." So then that's exactly what you said. You all said no, and it came to council. The council overturned, rightly. So I told you to say yes.
Yes, you did tell us to say
No,
yes.
I'm only joking with you. All right, thank you.
Any other comments or questions by staff? All right, quickly, is there anyone in this chambers who would like to speak to this? Mr. Soto, Mr. Pointer, Ms. Pointer, or Ms. Strohmeyer, do you want to speak to this?
Council, no, I'm just gonna wait for the overlay part of this item.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Councilman Miranda, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. Roll call vote.
Goods?
Yes.
Vieira?
Yes.
Maniscalco?
Yes.
Miranda?
Yes.
Hurtak?
Yes.
Carlson? Citro?
Yes,
Motion carried unanimously with Carlson being absent at vote.
thank you.
Okay, the next one are our single-family attached design standards. This was a privately initiated amendment that came from Mr. Michelini a few months ago. We noticed that the criteria is actually in 2 parts of the code and he only changed 1. So we would like to change the second part to be consistent. There are single-family attached standards for both fee simple, which is for sale product, and a rental product. And we only ended up changing it for fee simple. So we would like to have the code be consistent, and this would just clean that up.
Any comments or questions for staff? Thank you. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to speak to this part of the agenda item? Mr. Soto, Ms. Dolmar, and Ms. Pointer, would you like to speak to this?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Councilman Miranda, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. Roll call vote.
Carlson. Goods.
Yes.
Vieira. Maniscalco. Miranda.
Yes.
Hurtak.
Yes.
And Citro.
Yes,
Motion carried unanimously with Carlson being absent at vote.
thank you.
Access to the local street. I think access to the local street has been a long conversation for a long time. This is for non-residential uses. So non-residential uses are required to access an arterial or collector, with the exception of the Kennedy Boulevard overlay and Seminole Heights. If you're within 100 feet of an arterial or collector, you're allowed to access the local street. What I did do was pull all of the PDs that you have seen for the past 3 years and the special uses that have come to you on appeal over the past 3 years. There have been over 30 of them where this waiver has been granted for access for non-residential to the local streets. I believe you heard from Vic Bide a few months ago on actually how it is a safety matter when we allow people to go to the local street and then turn to the arterial or collector instead of forcing them directly out onto a high-speed street. It makes more sense. So we are asking to work on this, bring it back, that if you are within 100 feet of an arterial or collector, that you would be granted access to the local street for non-residential uses. So these are your commercial uses. Even your mixed-use uses are considered non-residential, so this would affect those as well. We believe this would also cut down on the number of waivers you see, the number of applications you entertain in relation to this, and allow projects some additional flexibility.
Comments or questions for staff?
Sounds logical.
Anyone in the chambers who wish to speak, make a public comment to this. Ms. Strohmeyer, Ms. Pointer, or Mr. Soto, do you want to make a comment on this?
No, thank you, Chairman.
I'll entertain a motion.
Hello? Gosh.
I'm sorry, who was that?
This is Jean Strohmeyer. I just want, when you keep asking if we have something to say, we're not unmuted fast enough for you to already vote on the issue. So if y'all can give us a second to get unmuted by the monitor, that would be great. You know, this is like the third time, y'all. Not that I really had anything specific, but when you say, do you have something to say? We're not unmuted. So if we can wait a second till we can get unmuted, that would be great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Ms. Strohmeyer, would you like to make a comment on this?
Oh, no, nice.
Thank you. Motion made by Councilman Miranda, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco.
Hey, wait.
Ms. Pointer. Jump on, Ms. Pointer.
I feel like I'm on Jeopardy today. I would like to suggest that if we have a comment to make, that we raise our hand. I don't know if Michelle can see that or not. Then that makes it easier. You don't have to ask. Actually, we had a long conversation with Mr. Benson and Ms. Travis about this particular issue yesterday because it was one of our 14 items, and we have decided that it's kind of a moot point, and it's probably after mobility and planning have hashed it out, that it's probably something that we need to just let it go. Thank you.
Ms. Pointer, you did not form that in the phrase of a question. I'm sorry. All right, everybody has made their comments. I have a motion made by Councilman Miranda, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. Roll call vote.
Vieira.
Yes.
Maniscalco.
Yes.
Miranda.
Yes.
Hurtak.
Yes.
Carlson.
Yes.
Goods.
Yes.
Citro.
Yes,
Motion carried unanimously.
thank you.
Okay, I've got two more quick ones. This next one is the alternative design exceptions. I think at the last workshop, we had a pretty extensive conversation based on setbacks within overlays and special districts and how those were treated as design exception ones that did not have public notice, but setback reductions in all other areas of the city were design exception twos and did have public notice. We mentioned to you that we wanted to unify this so that all the surrounding neighbors are getting notice. So we would like to go ahead and move any setback reductions to be design exception twos, which will require public notice to the surrounding property owners.
Any questions for staff? Any members any people here in chambers who would like to make a comment to this? Ms. Strollmeyer?
Thank you, Noah.
Thank you.
Noah.
Ms. Pointer?
No, thank you.
Mr. Soto?
Chairman. No, thank you, Chairman.
What is the pleasure of council? Motion made by Councilman Miranda, second by Councilman Maniscalco. Roll call vote.
Goods,
Yes.
Vieira,
Yes.
Maniscalco,
Yes.
Miranda,
Yes.
Hurtak,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
and Citro.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, council. And the last item is our CBD Design District Review. There is actually a section in the code that is not in the code. We conduct these downtown development reviews because there are no more rezonings in the downtown. We have CBD 1 and CBD 2, but they are required to go through this downtown design review process, and they can seek alternatives through that, et cetera. But the actual process is not codified. It refers to it, it creates a section for it, but it's never been codified. So we are writing that, we have a draft of that ready to go, and we would like to get your support in amending the code to actually include that formalized process, and that is our last publicly initiated amendment.
Any comments or questions for staff? Is there anyone in chambers who would like to speak to this? Mr. Soto, Ms. Strollmeyer, Ms. Pointer?
No, thank you, Chairman.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
No, thank you.
What is the pleasure of council? So moved. Motion made by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilman Miranda. Roll call vote.
Carlson,
Yes.
Hurtak,
Yes.
Miranda,
Yes.
Maniscalco, Vieira, Goods,
Yes.
and Citro.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, council. And now at this time, closing out all the housing, everything from this morning, item number 7 is the update on the housing needs assessment. If it's possible for us to jump to that real quick, Stephen Benson will give you that housing needs assessment update, where we are on that, and then we could proceed on to private amendments. Perhaps, I know the hour is approaching lunchtime, so I think we could wrap up that. That would knock out 7 and keep all of our housing discussion to this morning and conclude that, and we appreciate your indulgence again this morning.
Thank you. Mr. Benson?
Thank you very much. So council asked staff to evaluate what our long-term needs are going to be with housing. What types of housing will be needed not just to serve today's population, but the population 10, 20, 30 years into the future and how that is changing. We are going to be developing a housing needs evaluation that looks at data and trends up to 2022 so far, and also forecasts what the demand is going to be out through 2045. We're also going to be looking at a housing gap analysis. So going back to that slide I presented earlier, what types of housing are we actually missing? What types of housing do we need more of that we're not getting enough of through the marketplace right now? And then also putting an action plan together, because we are action-oriented, to make sure that we have short-term, mid-term, and long-term things we can do, quick fixes, analyzing what our regulations allow and don't allow, and what can be done to actually increase the inventory of naturally occurring affordable housing. How can we prevent gentrification? How can we protect long-term legacy residents? How can we conserve neighborhood compatibility and focus on affordability and workforce housing? These are all pieces that are part of what this evaluation is going to do. And then looking at our timeline, the motion was initiated in March. We put an RFP together in April and advertised that in May. The submissions were due on June 10th. Today we're providing you with our report. We're actually kicking off our selection process tomorrow and scheduling RFP award tentatively sometime around mid-July. We will bring back a contract to you. We're looking at around the August timeframe, and then anticipate a notice to proceed to the consultant in October. And the entire process should take about 10 months to totally complete from the NTP date.
Thank you, sir. Any questions?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Councilman Goods.
I know when we talked about this, we talked about housing emergency crisis within the city. And I specifically said that I want to make sure that when you're doing this study, this is incorporated in that, just in case we have to do that, so we won't say, well, we don't have a plan, or there's not a plan if this was to go to the voters or not. So I want to make sure that we're doing a thorough analysis of the housing crisis in the city of Tampa with this study. So am I getting you saying this is what we're thoroughly doing, sir?
Absolutely, yes,
All right,
sir.
thank you, sir.
Anybody else? Councilman Carlson?
Yeah, just quickly, we see a pattern over the last 3 years that the ideas that the city council creates that the administration likes suddenly have T3 branded all over them, and it excludes city council altogether. And again, if somebody wants to put T3 on this, fine, but it should be at the very least a collaboration or an initiative of city council. Otherwise, it makes the public feel like city council and the administration are at odds. So we ought to try to present a unified front if we're going to collaborate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is that all the questions for staff? Thank you. Is there any public comment to this agenda item number 7? Councilman Goods.
You know, Mr. Benson, you know, and to staff, you know, Mr. Carlson says these things, but you have to understand that when citizens come to us and ask this council to do things, and we ask these motions to come back for approval, you know, it seems like, you know, the administration does this or does whatever, and it's like it's the administration's idea versus the citizens' idea that came to this council. So I can see his point where he's saying on some of these things, initiatives, it should be a collaborative effort, not just a T3 or a mayor's idea, but the city's idea to deal with what the citizens ask us to do. So I kind of see his point, so maybe we can kind of, in the future, kind of follow that when there are ideas, it's a collaborative effort. So I see what he's saying.
In the future, we won't use any logos on our presentations.
I guess that's why you're the boss, Mr. Travis.
Is there anybody in chambers who would like to speak to item agenda 7?
So again, just clarification, and in regards to the needs assessment, back in February when we were here, I think a motion was made for this to be done. Am I correct? They say March, but I thought it was February. But anyhow, so is this the step that needs to be taken in order for the housing crisis to be declared an emergency?
That's been Travis to answer that, yeah.
So the needs assessment is being done. Is this the step that needs to be taken in order for housing to be declared as a state of emergency? A couple months ago, we came in, the attorney said, hey, we have to follow a process. So is this the step that needs to, in order for that to be done?
So I am not an attorney, but I play one on TV. But I'm going to yield to Mr. Massey in a second. But when the state statute doesn't, the burden is on the municipality to prove whether there's a housing emergency. In order to do that, you can't just take, the court is going to look for more than just newspaper articles. You're going to have some kind of data or some kind of metric and study to prove that. And with doing this housing needs assessment study, we'll not only be able to give us the information that the courts would probably be looking for, but it also would be the information that we need to help dictate policy for us to deal with housing, not just affordable housing, but all housing types based on trends, based on demographics for this community. And I'll stop playing attorney on TV.
Mr. Massey.
I just want to read from the statute what the statute requires. It's a very narrow, we have a very narrow opportunity in the statute to institute rent control. And what it says is the governing body must make, recite, and establish the existence of facts of a housing emergency so grave as to constitute a serious menace to the general public, and that also that such controls are necessary and proper to eliminate such a grave housing emergency. So those are the two things that we have to do. We are likely, if we're going to institute a rental control ordinance and it goes to the voters and it's approved, it's likely going to be litigated. And what a court's going to look at, and there's some case law to back this up, they're looking for factual basis to support the those findings. And so we do need to have a factual basis. And so this needs analysis would assist us in providing that factual basis. So, and the burden of proof is on the city in any litigation. So.
Chairman.
Councilman Miranda.
I really appreciate that very much, and if this is not a housing emergency, then Russia never invaded Ukraine.
Councilman Goods.
You know, I never liked the word rent control. I don't like that word because rent control to me does not work per se. Because you can look at New York and you can look at, you can't be at $400 for decades and you can't be able to sustain the building for $400. Now, I do like the sustainability. It's a little difference. So, Mr. Stabilization, he just
Rate stabilization.
I just said stability. So I think there's a difference when people get afraid. You say rent control versus stabilization. So you got to be careful with that because it kind of a scary tactic. So.
Understand, but what the statute says is no controls at all on the rent.
I understand.
And so stabilization would be instituting some form of regulation, stabilizing or placing limitations on an ability of landlord to increase the rent would be viewed by a court as triggering the statute, no matter how you phrase it.
Mr. Chairman, can you tell us what word to use?
Just saying whatever word you use, unfortunately, it falls, I think, under the statute.
I understand, sir.
Councilman Carlson.
Yeah, two things real fast. Ms. Loggett, this absolutely is a response. I think Goods or somebody made the motion. Absolutely is a response to all the folks that you and others organized to come here. I've talked to you about my feelings on some of the policies of what I think we can and can't do based on all the advice we've gotten. And I think you see today and just about every week that we have a commitment to try to solve these issues with lots of different tools. And you see staff working hard to work with us on it. Even though this may be a requirement, a legal requirement for that proposal, it also will be great information that we can all use to rally the community to get all the other things that we need, and hopefully rally investors to invest more in the market so we can get more affordable housing. But look forward. I think we all look forward to working with you all on all the different ideas that you have. You're doing lots of research on other cities, and you're giving us lots of ideas, and we're studying them all. And look forward to coming back with more proposals. Thank you.
So I appreciate the grace. And just one other thing. So what we're dealing with is greed. And just based on the statute itself, we have no other choice, right? So even if it's for a year, because that's what the statute holds, you have to do it for a year. Until we get other stuff in order, it will cease because now we're dealing with greed. We're dealing with people that don't have integrity because it's all about the money. And this is a crisis for our communities, for everybody. It ain't just Blight, it's everybody. So walking, chewing bubblegum at the same time, getting the needs assessment, but also putting the declaring housing a state of emergency on the ballot because we're walking and chewing bubblegum at the same time, right? While we create that.
The ordinance, though, must state the facts upon which we're basing that determination. So we do need to have those facts before we adopt the ordinance. That is what the statute says. And legally, we're going to be challenged if we do this, and we need to do it carefully. That's my advice.
So the ordinance says that you have to do it before, or?
It says that this body must adopt an ordinance first, and then it goes to a vote of the electorate of the city. So this ordinance, the findings have to be incorporated into the ordinance. So these findings, this factual basis for declaring a housing emergency and also declaring these rental stabilization measures as a basis for eliminating that housing emergency, all have to be established at the time you adopt the ordinance. They can't be done after that.
Got it. Councilwoman Hurtak.
Additionally to that, if we were to do that and wait, the lawsuit would come and most likely the judge would postpone it and allow rent to continue. So we are stuck in a rock and a hard place, and we have to get the data.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Lockett. Okay. I only see one person for agenda item number 7, and that's Gene Strohmeyer. Do you want to make any comment? No hands up. What is the pleasure of council?
Yes, no, 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 hello? Hello? Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
ma'am.
Holy Mother of God, thank you. Jesus, hallelujah. Gene Strohmeyer here. Okay, yes, I do have a few things to say on this one. Okay, first of all, a state of emergency. We're talking about a state of emergency. What happens when we get a big hurricane that knocks out the entire peninsula here? All the way up, or a flood, which is predicted to come all the way up to Cyprus, up 17 feet in the air, a storm surge. That's an emergency. That is a state of emergency. The people in Ukraine right now, if they think that if we're trying to say that this is a state of emergency, they would laugh in our faces and probably shoot us, because they would say, y'all don't know what an emergency is. This is a crisis in a state of emergency. We're using language that is very, very dangerous, and to be using it so flippantly like this, I feel it's just a little, it's dangerous. Yes, we have a housing problem that people can't afford rent. Yes, we do have a major problem there. But to call it an emergency and a state of emergency, try a hurricane, tornado. How about the people over in Homestead that lost their homes? That is a crisis. That's the state of emergency. The people that took on the hurricane up in the Panhandle, that's a state of emergency. That is a crisis. But just, we're short on short on apartments and short on houses. That it doesn't rise to a state of emergency. It just doesn't. And the people in Ukraine and the people that lost their actual homes, that lost billions of dollars of damage, that is a state of emergency. 911, that was a state of emergency. That was a crisis. We have a shortage on homes, and it's a problem. It's a big problem, but it's not a state of emergency. It wouldn't rise to that level. Ask the Ukraine people.
Councilman Maniscalco.
I think that a family or anyone facing homelessness is definitely an emergency, or losing everything, or having to live in the street. That's an emergency. I don't know what's more clear. Thank you.
Councilman Miranda.
Thank you, Chairman. From what I've heard for the past time, and it's been kind of lengthy already, and with no results, is that an emergency is when you have an X factor. Let's say you're paying $700, $800, $900 a month, and in the next month it's $1,300, and 3 months later it's $1,500. If that's not an emergency, I don't know what the hell is.
Councilman Goods.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is where I get myself in trouble. You know, as a black person, we've always had many emergencies. But until it affects other races, it's a difference. But when it affects everybody, it's a great emergency. We got to do something about it. But as a black man, when there are emergencies, when crack was an emergency in my community, it was an emergency to others. But when our counterparts and children start dying from pills, things like that, it was an emergency. It was mental illness. It was mental illness. Now the housing crisis, we in the black community, we've always had housing issues, but now it's affecting our middle class, even our upper class society. It's affecting them as well. So now it's an emergency all over. So now we're rushing to do things about it. So I just want people to understand that, you know, there's always issues, but it has to be an issue of everybody, not just sometimes it's an issue for certain people versus some people deal with issues all the time. So to me, I see it a different view, but when you're homeless and when you got a mother who's going to McDonald's every morning to watch your kids to go to school, sitting in a car, and I've experienced that. I've seen it up close and personal, where families are in the bathroom at Burger King in the morning trying to get their kids clean to go to school, or they're in the parking lot all night sleeping, you know, in a hot car, pulling up in a police car and wondering what is in that car, and I see kids in that car, and I got to get in my pocket or call other guys to get them food because they haven't eaten all day because the only meal they had was the breakfast and lunch they had at school. So I know what emergency is. I know some people say, well, people got to get their bootstraps and get extra jobs. Well, hell, some of those jobs, even you got two of them, ain't still paying enough to pay the rent and pay your needs. So I mean, I know Ms. Strohmeyer is a nice lady, I respect what she's saying, but right now, when you don't have a place to lay your head at night, that's an emergency. I don't care how you look at it. So that's just my analogy on it. You know, it's an emergency when it affects everybody, but I've had, as a black man, emergencies all my life, and our community have, and now, when the rubber is road, it's really an emergency. And we have a housing emergency.
What's the pleasure of council?
May I, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Thank you. No, and I wanted to agree with those sentiments. I mean, we have a lot of emergencies in this country and in our community. We have, we've been hearing for probably 20, 30 years that we have a healthcare crisis and a healthcare emergency. You know, even after the passage of the ACA, we have about 30 million Americans who, if they get sick today, can't likely afford a doctor, millions more underinsured. We have in a lot of our communities, and we hear a lot about this, a gun violence crisis. And I believe in emergency for many, many of our at-risk communities, and we certainly do have an affordable housing crisis and emergency. When in the last year, the costs of housing have gone up well over 30%. We know that nationally there is a hurricane on housing affordability, and it would appear that Tampa Bay is at the eye of that storm. And for me, that is a crisis, that is an emergency. I think the objective facts wear that out, and whatnot. And I think all of us want to do everything that we can to help folks, but I think focusing on the semantics of it probably won't get us anywhere. But I do believe that we have an emergency and a crisis, obviously. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Benson? This was...
I think, I mean...
Mr. Massey, that's just going to clarify that.
Yeah, I think what he's presented to you, the update, which is
just
what
an
you requested.
update.
So yeah, there's no action.
I was going to ask him if
that has to be taken per se.
If he was finished with his update. Are you finished with your update?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benson. Any further questions? Councilman Carl.
In terms of scheduling, can we have an estimate as to how much time everything else will take?
And that's where I was just trying to get to right now. We have agenda item number 3. Mr. Hay, are you ready for that? No, that's just an update. And I'm trying to get them out of here now so they don't have to come back for lunch. When we're finished, we'll then bundle everything when we're going to come back for those motions we passed.
Is it possible, my question was just, is it possible to get a time estimate on how much each thing would take? And while I have the floor, I think on an item like number 6 in the future, that we ought to have these text amendments as separate line items, or at least detail them in the agenda so that the public and we have can estimate how much time these things are going to take.
And Ms. Travis and Ms. Feely and I had discussed this, and it was a collaborative effort to feel that this would have gone smoother this way than to break down things individually, since we were all talking about accomplishing the same things through each of these type of amendments. Ms. Travis.
Yes, thank you. So we were trying to follow the motions, and because we were bringing in accessory dwelling units, that was not a motion. It's why we didn't separate it out. In the future, we could probably break out our workshop topics for you. As far as giving an estimate, I think we can complete the rest of the agenda in 30 minutes. No, you're looking at me, not the privately initiated.
We have four privately initiated, I think.
Is it 4 privately?
Yeah.
How much time do you need for that? They're saying that we need an hour for the privately initiated item. An hour. We have an hour, and then I know that Ms. Zornita can do her presentation in less than 10 minutes.
Then why don't we take this one, then we'll come back and have a time and date and time certain for all the motions that we have made to come back from staff for us, and then we'll come back for lunch for the others.
Yeah, why don't we try to set the date and time for all those motions that were made supporting now, and then have Ms. Ordinita come after that? I think that would be a better way to go.
What is the pleasure of council?
October 20. October 20.
We have them.
Can I ask real quick? So on all the publicly initiated text amendments, those are really ready to get started. I know the next cycle with the Planning Commission is August 5th. So the first three concepts we talked about, the specified use, the bonus, and the ADUs, I think that would be perfect for October. That gives us time to do the community outreach and stakeholder outreach and come back to you. On the city-initiated text amendments, I think we could come sooner to get those into the hopper and get things underway. So it would be, I know you're on vacation and then August, but even September, I think, would be good for that.
Councilman Carlson.
Is it possible the privately initiated text amendments could wait till the next workshop, or do we have to cover them today?
I believe those applicants are here and they're ready to go, and they would like to have those matters covered today.
Is that all right with the rest of council, that we hear those later on this afternoon?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion made by Councilman Maniscalco to bring everything that we had talked about earlier this morning and made motions and passed for October 20th, 9:01. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
And the time certain, do we have a time certain?
9:01?
Oh, yeah, 9:30 or 10:30 is usually when we bring.
9:30.
Okay.
And then, can I make an amendment for those publicly initiated amendments to come back instead in September? What time do you need? September 1st or September?
The 15th?
The
Is that a
15th,
regular-
September 15th at 9:30.
Yeah.
You amended it so. We have a motion made by Councilwoman Hurtak, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. Roll call vote.
Carlson,
Yes.
Goods,
Yes.
Vieira, Maniscalco, Miranda,
Yes.
Hurtak,
Yes.
and Citro.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Mr. Benson.
Thank you, sir. Stephen Benson. I'm joined today by Melissa Zornita with the Planning Commission. This is the update on the mixed-use development minimum threshold. Melissa is going to start the presentation off and go through where we've been, summarize the recommendations, and then I'm going to speak to some additional information we were asked to bring back last time to support the recommendations being made today.
Great. Thank you so much for taking this up. Melissa Zornita, Executive Director of the Planning Commission. We'll be quick to get you out before for lunch. As a recap of where we've been working with the city staff on this study since 2021. We brought forward a study and report on best practices on how to handle mixed use at the end of last year. Many of the findings of that were that the most successful utilization of requirements for mixed use were not citywide, but geographically specific to certain corridors or nodes, activity centers, transit area, station areas, things of that nature. So we then came back in April with a recommendation to, as a first step in implementing further specification to mixed use, add a size criteria into the floor area ratio bump that is already an incentive in the adopted comprehensive plan. So specifically, this would apply to 3 land use categories: community mixed use 35, community commercial 35, and UMU 60. Those all allow for a higher FAR if there is a vertically integrated mixed use. But it doesn't specify how much of a vertically integrated mixed use is required. So what we would be proposing is to require at least 5% or 1,500 square feet, whichever is greater. There we go. I also wanted to bring you all up to speed that we have initiated a future land use assessment as part of the update of the comprehensive plan. This is a comprehensive look at all of the land use categories. Are they the right density? Do they have the right floor area ratios required? Are they in the right locations? Are the requirements and specifications of what we want out of that category furthering the city's collective vision? So that study is underway. It has as a focus creating more affordable housing, just like you've all been talking about tools this morning, and promotion of mixed use. So we anticipate that as that consultant work brings forward some recommendations in the fall, that we will have additional recommendations on how to implement mixed use. So at this time, our recommendation is if you want to move forward with a plan amendment in your August cycle of plan amendments, we can move forward with that incentive-based approach to add that requirement into the FAR incentive. And then we continue to work on this as part of the future land use assessment. And I'll now turn it over to Stephen to talk about some examples.
Great. So we wanted to bring back visuals to show you what the 5% actually means in terms of what's going to get built, what's not going to get built, and what's been built recently and how it might be affected. So this is an example of a project on Southwest Shore, just south of Gandy Boulevard. This was in the CMU land use category, so it's this same land use category. And you can see there is no second use provided. It's all residential, and the ground floor is parking up against West Shore Boulevard, which is a commercial corridor in the city. So this is the type of project we would be looking at to try to incentivize mixed use as new projects come online. This is an example of a project in West Tampa. This was on an intersection of a collector road. 0.5% of the project's floor area was non-residential. It was in a mixed-use land use category. But again, I mean, it's really up to you to take a look at this and decide for yourselves, is this enough? Is this really meeting our basic expectations for a mixed-use project? Again, 0.5%, and we're proposing 10 times that. So 10 times the 1,100 square feet would obviously be 10,000 square feet of non-residential on the ground floor. Looking at the Jade, this was at Willow at Cass. This one came in at 2.4% non-residential. Again, what this would look like is essentially double the amount of that second non-residential use on the ground floor. So you can visualize how it would interact with the street better and really almost cover half of the ground floor along Cass Street. Looking at an example from Seminole Heights, this example is at 7% non-residential, and you can see it covers the entire ground floor fronting the collector. Any more than 7%, and you'd be looking at going to the second level, which really doesn't make a lot of sense when it comes to putting mixed-use, vertically integrated mixed-use projects together. And then the last example we have, Howard and Morrison. This was 8% non-residential. Again, the entire ground floor was activated. Going up to 10% would really be a little bit too much and be more than what we would be looking for. And so this just summarizes the recommendation that we would like to move forward with. The text in your packet does include some cleanup language that addresses the term performance provision versus bonus provision, but it's just cleanup language. But this would be a 5% or 1,500 square feet requirement for a second use for sites that front arterials or collectors in those three land use categories. And that maximum development potential, the maximum FAR, wouldn't change. By doing this, they would be allowed to hit that maximum. And so we'd look to move this forward as a comprehensive plan amendment.
Comments or questions from council? Councilwoman Hurtak.
I just want to say I love the visuals. I'm a very visual learner. So just seeing the missed opportunities and the opportunities that where they really utilized it, it's very dramatic. And so thank you for that. And I absolutely support this.
Any other comments or questions? I'm going to make a statement. 5% I do not believe is enough. That is my personal opinion. I think it should be set higher. Having the developers use their burden of proof on why lesser should be put in. That is just my opinion. I think we're missing out on the availability for retail to be on bottom floor. Again, that's my opinion. Have the developers meet the burden of proof on their end on why it should be less. I threw that out there. I don't have the last word, so Councilman Guth will have the last word.
You know, like Councilman Hurtak said, visual is good because you can see opportunity. I see opportunity of maybe a small barbershop, a sub shop. You know, if you're talking about that's a community there and that's what you're doing, then these are the things you need. You talk about taking away parking. People need to drive to eat. They need to drive to go to the grocery store. These are some small little, you know, low-hanging fruit that they don't have to go, have to worry about somebody coming to pick them up. Run right down the apartment, get what you need, go back, you're good to go. So I think Mr. Citro is right. I think 5% may be a little bit too low.
Councilman Carlson.
You yield? I yield back. No,
I'm sorry, Councilman Miranda, I didn't see you.
No, it's
Councilman
all right.
Carlson, I'll come back to you.
I understand the logistics of the conversation. However, it depends on where this is located. If you have this building in four corners, which you may have, you have some here on Cass now that look something like this, and everybody's got this amount, you're looking for a half failure automatically. Because 4 of these buildings with 7% or 8% or 10%, you're gonna have some failures from the start, get-go. And I'm not opposed to the 5%, I'd like to see more. It depends where it's at. I mean, you just can't say blanket, everything's the same. It's not. So it depends how these buildings are built, where they're built, and maybe we can define that somehow. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out as an idea.
Just want to point out one example in terms that I think would address both of your questions about, is this really enough? Even though the 5% amount is not being increased, our recommendation was to stay at 5%, the actual locations are being increased. So the mixed-use categories, right now, you can only use that incentive if you're on an arterial. We're proposing that in locations where they're on collectors, so an example here on the screen is the Duckweed grocer that was in West Tampa. That's a collector. That would not have been able to access this incentive. That's what's also included in this. So even though the 5% is not going up, the number of locations that are eligible is going up, and so therefore, our recommendation is that you're going to get more simply because of that. It may not be more in the same building, but it's going to be spread throughout the community.
Councilman Carlson.
Yeah, just for the public watching, this in part closes a loophole that we faced before without talking about any specifics. Also, as at least certain neighborhoods and corridors become very dense, it provides services that people can walk to. We've talked about the neighborhood commercial district concept, so that takes traffic off the road, makes the roadways hopefully more clear and less polluted. But I also agree with Chair Citro. I wish we could have it as more, and then you have to negotiate downward. Thank you.
And to you, please,
If I could
ladies
just
first.
add one thing, as part of the plan amendment process, we certainly would have some community outreach meetings, continue to get input from the neighborhoods and the industry. So the proposal and the recommendation may be refined as we go through that plan amendment process and continue to get input.
And Mr. Benson, to your point, that would be where the burden of proof would come in for the developers. I'm at a dead-end street. I don't have the capabilities. There wouldn't be the foot traffic. Or something to the effect of, well, the building right next door to me has 40% retail space. There's my burden of proof. I would lose money. That's what I'm saying about the burden of proof. If we have that cap, again, put the burden of proof on the developer, not on city council by begging people to do something. That's the point I was trying to make.
These are all great ideas, and I think that's why Melissa has emphasized we want to take a look at all of these ideas as part of updating the land use categories, but this is the quick fix that we can offer today to take a first step. The other thing I do just want to mention to clarify to Councilman Carlson that the neighborhood commercial district corridors that we've studied and looked at, they're actually now being added as part of this amendment because those were collector roadways. So those are being brought in to the discussion to access this incentive and see more mixed-use development.
Excellent. I believe that Stephanie Pointer is on the line and she would like to make a comment.
Yes, sir. This is Stephanie Pointer. I support Mr. Benson's presentation, and I think Carol Ann said that she did too. He spent quite a bit of time with us, talking to us about it last week.
I believe that's
And that's it.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion made by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilman Miranda. Is there any further discussion? Roll call vote.
Goose.
Yes.
Vieira.
Yes.
Maniscalco.
Yes.
Miranda.
Yes.
Hurtak.
Yes.
Carlson.
Yes.
Citro.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right, council members.
2 o'clock.
I would like to, that's going to take an hour. That's going to take an hour. That's why I am going to say, let's go to recess until
1:30?
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock, all right.
Would that be all right?
And if I may, I have a 2:30 call, which will probably take about 10 or 15 minutes that I have to do for something, but other than that, I'm good.
Is
Just for
2
the record.
o'clock fine?
Yes.
2 o'clock recess. We're adjourned. Excuse me, we're in recess.